Again, welcome to the fourth Ruth Atkins Speaker Series event. My name is Tim Sheridan. I am the Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Lake Elsinore, and I am very happy to introduce our speaker tonight. Please welcome Jim Hinckley. He is a prolific author. He has written 23 books, including 7 books on Route 66. And with that, sir, I hand you the microphone and thank you for being here.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. I didn't realize this was going to be on TV. That kind of messes things up with the witness protection program. Before we start this, I guess a little background is in order. He mentioned I've written 23 books. My quest, it's a childhood dream to become a writer when I grow up. So that's what I'm working on, becoming a writer and growing up. Route 66 it's really difficult to describe what this highway is and what it's become. For me personally, it's a road, but it's almost everything in my life. And if there wasn't some sort of copyright infringement, we could get the Twilight Zone theme song going. But pretty much everything in my life since about 1959 has been tied to Route 66. And yes, I am that old. With that said, let's give you a little idea here. Not only did I'm basically blue collar. And I started pursuing, with encouragement from my dearest friend, my wife, for about 43 years, I started doing this back in about 1990. She mentioned several times that I had a gift for telling people where to go. And other people said that I could tell stories for hours, even if I'm the only one in the room, and still enjoy myself. So I started putting the two together, and that became Jim Hinckley's America back in 1990. And it became a full-time job just before my 60th birthday, about 12 years ago. I developed eye trouble at work. I couldn't see any reason to put up with their bullshit, and they couldn't see any reason to put up with my attitude, so we parted ways. So this became a full-time job, and it's been a grand adventure because I greatly enjoy encouraging people to discover America's story through road trips. And Route 66 is a big part of that. With that said, we'll get you started here. You might have heard of this little song by Bobby Troop, but if you plan to motor west, getting your kicks on Route 66. Bobby Troop had gotten out of the Marine Corps at the end of World War II. He lived in Pennsylvania, made a trip to California. And along the way, he and his wife started cooking up the lyrics for this catchy little tune. And they were building on almost a 20-year promotional campaign that had been billing Route 66 as the main street of America. And when he got to California as a fledgling songwriter, he got the folks at CBS to help him put it to a tune. Then he approached a fellow named Nat King Cole, and it went to the top of the charts. And it's a catchy little tune about winding its way from Chicago to LA. This is one of the things that makes Route 66 unique to start with. It follows the railroad from Chicago to Los Angeles. The original western terminus is in the theater district of downtown Los Angeles. And contrary to popular belief, it does not go to Santa Monica Pier. But who's going to drive to Lincoln and Olympic and Santa Monica and not go the rest of the way if you started in Chicago? This was kind of fortuitous, this lyric in the song, when it mentions all these little towns and cities that the road goes through. Because Route 66 today, it is a linear community. It really is America's longest small town. And all of these little towns that the road goes through, they're basically like Chinatown in LA. They're neighborhoods in this weird, quirky community. This is a lot of people, this song, you mentioned how popular this song was. It's the most recorded song in history. Almost everyone has done this, from Elvis Presley, the Beatles. I don't want to say it was a pleasure, it was an interesting experience, but I actually got to hear a drunk polka band in Poland do a rendition of this song. And of course, Route 66, from its inception, the reason we talk about Route 66 and not Highway 395 or US 6 or US 12, From its inception, Route 66 has always had the best press and the best publicity. It originally started out with the federal highway system was created in 1925-26. And there was a lot of political going back and forth compromises. My pa said it was better to fill your head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. So if this comes up on Jeopardy and you make some money, please don't forget me. But Route 66 was originally US 60. And some of the states got pretty upset because they'd started printing maps and highway signs. But they had to have all the states sign on to the federal highway system. And the governor of Kentucky, he wanted for some reason US 60 to go through his neighborhood. So they compromised and it became Route 66. A little catchier than if you tune about getting your kicks on US 60. But there were some really bright fellas that came up, Cyrus Avery out of Tulsa and some other visionary leaders. And they started the US Highway 66 Association. Route 66 came into being in November of 1926, and by spring of 1927, they had formed the US Highway 66 Association. And it had two purposes. Get Route 66 paved from end to end, and number two, promotion. Basically a chamber of commerce for the Route 66 corridor. And they came up with incredible marketing schemes almost immediately. They endorsed this crazy transcontinental foot race called the Bunyan Derby. The Bunyan Derby was a foot race from Los Angeles to New York City. And the US Highway 66 Association endorsed this, provided it would follow Route 66 to Chicago. This is 1928, and there's a $25,000 purse. So needless to say, international media attention for the race and for Route 66. That publicity got magnified because there was a 19-year-old Cherokee boy from Foyle, Oklahoma. This was a community on Route 66, farming community. And he was famous as a runner in that area. So the town pooled money for his entrance fee and sent the boy to LA. And he started with no shoes. And it became a David and Goliath story because by the time they got to Oklahoma, he was leading the pack. And by the time they got to New York, he'd won the race. So that put Route 66, Foyle, Oklahoma, and Andy Payne on the map. In 1932, they started promoting full-page ads in papers all over the country. The Olympics were in Los Angeles. They promoted Route 66 as the scenic highway to the Olympics. And then it went on and on. We had the Grapes of Wrath. We had the song. We had connection to Will Rogers. In 1953, they named it the Will Rogers Highway. They put a plaque at the Palisades Park in Santa Monica. They had a caravan. But the I Love Lucy TV show, there was a 5-part series where they left New York and they drove to California. That was on Route 66. You had Ace in the Hole. This was an Academy-nominated film with Kirk Douglas. That was filmed almost entirely on Route 66 in New Mexico. It centered on a trading post at the Cave of the Seven Devils over at Lupton, Arizona. Then you had the TV show. Then you had Easy Rider. It was filmed almost entirely on Route 66. Two-Lane Blacktop. Anybody remember that movie? With Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys. That was filmed on Route 66. And it just goes on and on. And before anybody asks, I do not have pictures. But Pamela Anderson got in trouble in Kingman during a Playboy photo shoot for being topless on Route 66. So the highway's always gotten promotion and publicity. And it's really an amazing, you can find things like this on all the highways, but not only did Route 66 follow the railroad, but it connects, it's like a linear time capsule, a living museum. Here's some examples. From the upper left, you have that old store there. That's the last of the Stonydale Court in Jerome, Missouri. The bottom picture there is the El Rancho in Holbrook, Arizona. It's the oldest building in Holbrook, dating to about 1882. And it started out as a boarding house, and then it became a hotel. Then they added a motel to it, and it evolved. To show you how I mentioned this is a linear time capsule, In New Mexico, Route 66 runs through things like Laguna Pueblo, where the church was built in 1699. You have the Kingman Army Airfield from World War II. And then at the bottom, you have the Route 66 Experience that just opened at the Illinois State Fairgrounds. Yes, there's a common denominator for the U.S. highway system that gave birth to Route 66 and to the auto industry that spawned the highways. You want to guess what those two denominators, those two columns are? Bicycles and manure. That's really the foundation of the auto industry and the highways. New York City was not alone in this. Cities all over the world were struggling by the mid-1890s. And it literally, New York commissioned a report, and they did call this the manure crisis. Not only do you have 2.5 million pounds of manure a day piling up on the streets, you've got the urine, and you've got dead horses in the streets. Sometimes it'd be a week before the city would pick them up. So needless to say, this is kind of a health crisis. So we go to the bicycle. These were called penny farthing bicycles. They were 44 to 60-inch front wheels. They were the ideal vehicle for getting in shape while you commit suicide. But believe it or not, that spawned, it was like the automobile a couple decades later. It was a play toy for the rich. But they started bicycle racing. They were racing these things. One fella named Stevens literally rode one of these around the world, through Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, and wrote a book about it. Became quite a bestseller. In the 1885, a fellow named Starling came up with a modern bicycle, 2 equal wheels, and the chain or shaft drive. And it started selling it to the masses, basically the Model T for personalized transportation. And it became just insane. It became bicycle mania, just swept the country. In 1890, you had 27 companies producing about 40,000 bicycles. By 1896, you're rolling out 1.5 million bicycles. And the more I delve into the bicycle history during this period, the more astounding it becomes. There were bicycle clubs being formed all over the country. When you think, we're talking 1890s, this is just 20 years after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. We're talking at the period of Wounded Knee. And we've got bicycle clubs forming in Laramie, Wyoming. Elmer Lovejoy putting together bicycle clubs, and they're riding from there to the Yellowstone or to the Chicago World's Fair on bicycles. There was even a bicycle club in Phoenix that was organizing trips to the Grand Canyon in 1890. And it was promoted as the great family activity. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you picture the state safety now? And one of the problems with the bicycles was the same one that the automobilist would have a few years later. There were no roads. These were great in the city, but where do you ride them? Even though you got bicycle clubs riding, there's no roads anywhere. And there's crazy laws, just like the automobilists would face later, the bicyclists faced. You can't ride bicycles on city streets on Sundays. Women cannot be on bicycles on weekends. All these different crazy things. So an organization was formed, the League of the American Wheelmen, and they became a massive group. They even had members that were Supreme Court justices, former presidents, and it started working with the Grange movement, postal roads, pushing for a network of roads. A place where you could ride these, and practical, sensible regulations for where you could ride bicycles. And interestingly enough, they had a chapter called the Wheelwoman, strictly for women. It's interesting that they offered and worked with companies for bicycle wear for women, like corsets that allow expansion of your lungs. Kind of a handy little thing. But they began producing guidebooks, road books, travel books. They started working with the railroads. A fellow named Libby invented an electric assist bicycle, and another gentleman patented a folding bicycle, and the train started offering special excursion rates to hotels and resorts for people for their trains, for their bicycle clubs. And you had bicycle clubs like in the big cities like New York. It's crazy. They had, instead of an automotive section in the newspapers, they had a bicycle section about new bicycle developments, bicycle routes, bicycle tours, bicycle clothing, and bicycle clubs. There was a bicycle club for rabbis in New York. There was the one for Norsemen. Almost every ethnic group that you can imagine had their own bicycle club in New York. And just as they talked about with the bicycle being a practical form of transportation, there's a certain irony to this. A few visionaries saw the solution for the pollution in the cities. The bicycles helped, but it wasn't enough, because that's only personal transportation. People like Eli Olds had an idea that automobiles are the solution for the pollution. But not quite what people think. Electric vehicles were the primaries. Ferdinand Porsche, his first vehicle was electric. We had electric vehicles and taxi cabs, buses on the streets of New York, 1898, 1899. Again, an opportunity to fill your head with a bit of useless knowledge. The first person struck and killed by an automobile in the United States was a fellow named Bliss. And I do not know how slow he was, but he was struck and killed by an electric taxi cab in 1898. And I mentioned the bicycles being part of the auto industry. Alexander Winton was a Scotch immigrant, and he made his first fortune with bicycles. And there's a fellow you may have heard of, a guy named Louis Chevrolet. You want to have some fun with car people? Go to a car show and tell them that Chevrolet is an import. That's always a good one. But Louis Chevrolet was from France, from Switzerland, near Switzerland. But he got started with bicycle racing, bicycle repair, and bicycle manufacturing. Well, we've got electric vehicles, we've got automobiles, are somewhat practical in the cities. But Alexander Winton and a lot of the early pioneering manufacturers, we need to take this further. If we're going to sell automobiles, we've got to prove that they can fully replace the horse. So in 1901, Alexander Winton attempted to drive from San Francisco across the United States. And he took with him a journalist from the Scientific American. Something like 2 weeks later, they made it into Nevada, and they gave up. The utter absence of roads was direct and only cause. The League of American Wheelmen, the bicycle organization, had pretty much given rise. The same people who were involved with that started morphing into the Good Roads Association. You had the Automobile Club of Southern California was very active by 1900. 1903, you had AAA was formed. So you had these organizations building on the work of the League of American Wheelmen, pushing for federal road system. Interestingly enough, it was Alexander Hamilton who had first pitched the idea of a federal road system for development. And it kind of got shelved, but Senator Henry Clay in 1830 began pushing what he called the American Plan. And that ended up with the National Road, the Erie Canal, these kind of things. And it fell by the wayside as the railroad came into prominence. But by the late 1890s, in the turn of the century, automobiles, we need roads. I don't have any evidence of this, but I assume drinking was involved. No good story of accepting a $50 bet starts with they were having tea and salad. Dr. Jackson was in California, and he accepted a $50 bet to drive a car across the United States. The problem with that is he didn't know anything about automobiles, and there were no roads, no gas stations. But he accepted the bet, bought a Winton automobile, and got a mechanic to go with him. They picked up a bulldog along the way. And 63 days later, he arrived on the East Coast, became the first person to drive a car across the United States. One of the things that astounds me about the auto industry, can you imagine being an auto salesman in these years? You go up to somebody and tell them this costs as much as a house, there's no roads, there's no place to buy gas, it'll probably break in 1,000 miles, you need this. How does that work? And it's amazing how quickly we adapted to automobiles. In 1893, the Duryea brothers began producing the first automobiles for sale in the United States. But nobody knew what they were. What do we do with these things? 1896, Barnum Bailey Circus. They gave a Duryea motor wagon top billing over the albino and the dog-faced boy at the circus. Montgomery Ward said it's a fad you need to take the children to see before it passes. In 1898, we had the first automobile race in America. And in 1900, Madison Square Gardens, 40 automobile manufacturers were showing their new cars. But the problem was, we needed something, some place to drive these things. And so organizations like Automobile Club of Southern California and AAA, they started hiring these people to map roads for promoting tourism, see the national parks, drive to California. And they hired amazing adventures. One of my favorites is a fellow named A.L. Westgard. He was a Norwegian immigrant that came here as a railroad survey engineer. He got hired by AAA and some of these other organizations. And this ties into the Route 66 story, is why I bring up Mr. Westgard. His exploits were extraordinary, and he had a gift for gab, and he was a good photographer. So not only was he mapping the roads, he was writing books and creating magic lantern slideshows and encouraging people to travel, to see the roads. And that put pressure on the states and the federal government to start developing a road system. One of the roads that he put together was called Trail to Sunset. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But for our story today, this is one of the main ones. We had the Lincoln Highway, we had the Pikes Peak Highway, we had the Ocean to Ocean Highway, and these were all private organizations, organized by communities, organized by auto companies, and some were not, they were fraudulent. They would come into a town and we'll build a road connecting Lake Elsinore with Los Angeles. They take the money and you never see them again. Or Lake Elsinore doesn't pay their dues. On Wednesday, the highway goes through Lake Elsinore, and Friday, it goes through Winchester. So that was a problem. This is an interesting road, and this is part of the Route 66 story, is the National Old Trails Road. It was pushed by the Daughters of the American Revolution. They wanted to put together a coast-to-coast road that knitted America's historic trails together. I mentioned the National Road, our first federal funded road. That was part of the National Trails Road. They put the Santa Fe Trail and different historic trails, the Wire Road in Missouri, the Pontiac Trail in Illinois. And they came up with the idea of the National Old Trails Road. And to give you an idea of the history in tying this together, Route 66 and these early roads, is this place. This is a place called the Pigeon Ranch. And legend has it, it was established by a French-Canadian who spoke Pidgin English. That road in front of there is the Santa Fe Trail. That was also, this building was established as a hostelry on the Santa Fe Trail in the 1850s. And there's a well across the road, still there to this day. Nobody knows how old it is, but the Spanish conquistadors wrote about that well being there. The National Old Trails Road followed the Santa Fe Trail. They were knitting these historic trails. And Route 66 followed the National Old Trails Road. That building still stands. Park Service preserves it. It's on the pre-1937 alignment of Route 66 in New Mexico. It also served as a field hospital during the Battle of Glorieta Pass in the Civil War. So you have all this history. This is another thing that makes Route 66, even today, a spectacular trip through time as well as distance. And this is what the National Old Trails Highway looked like. This is a trip that was pretty spectacular. I didn't know about this until a few years ago, but Edsel Ford and his college buddies in 1915, they followed the National Old Trails Road. Like a lot of tourists later, they wanted to see the Southwest, the Grand Canyon, the Native American villages in New Mexico. So in 1915, they'd follow the National Old Trails Road to California. And this gives you an idea of how crazy travel was at this time. This is from his diary of 1915. And he had lunch at Ash Fork. You can read this, where he broke a spring on the Stutz. Yeah, it was a good day's run. They left Williams, Arizona that morning, arrived in Kingman at the Brunswick Hotel, 156 miles. They arrived at midnight. They thought it was a good day's run. They only broke a spring and had 2 flat tires. This was another problem with the road associations. We had highways in name only. And this lady, anybody familiar with Emily Post?
Oh, yeah.
She also made a trip west. Road trips became the thing, especially for the rich and famous. Model Ts were changing things, but for people to take holidays by car was becoming a thing. Emily Post took a trip in 1915. As a matter of fact, Emily Post and Edsel Ford were just 2 of the 20,000 plus people who attended the Panama Pacific Exposition in Chicago that year that arrived from outside of the state by automobile. She wrote a book about her exploits, and I highly recommend it. It's been reprinted on, and you can pick it up on Amazon, by Motor to the Golden Gate. This ties into the, I mentioned A.L. Westgard. One of the trails he put together was called Trail to Sunset. It had at its eastern terminus in downtown Chicago, the exact same location that would become the terminus for Route 66 in 1926. He put this together about 1912, and it basically ran diagonal across the United States, connected with the ocean-to-ocean highway at Yuma, Arizona. When the National Old Trails Road was first established, it connected with Trail to Sunset and then went down to Yuma, Arizona. And it was a group of business owners in Needles, California, and Kingman, Seligman, with backing from the railroad. One of these fellows was Thomas Devine, the father of character actor Andy Devine. He owned the Hotel Beale in Kingman, Arizona. And they went to the 1913 National Old Trails Road Convention and convinced them to reroute the National Old Trails Road along the railroad, which was the Beale Wagon Road, across northern Arizona. And the reasons were tourism was one. Grand Canyon, we had all these things we could market. You had better hotels. You had established hotels along the railroad, like the Harvey House, the El Garces, and Needles. And one of the things they didn't mention was that when you destroyed your car on these terrible roads, you could put the remains on the train and send them home. That's what happened with Emily Post. She made it to Arizona. But the trails were not working. We're swamping this. And the other part of this was navigation. Because all these trail associations had their own whatever, their own guidebooks they would put out, their own markings. You'd get a guidebook that say, turn left at the bridge that used to be painted yellow, or follow the blue stripes on the fence post. And Wisconsin in 1918 became the first one that tried to put some semblance of sanity to this by putting highway numbers. But we had a really fascinating period between 1885 and 1930. And this is an example. In 1909, you had 28,000 horse-drawn vehicles, and only 125,000 automobiles were produced. As another one of those little trivia points, Studebaker, they got their start in making wheelbarrows and other things, and by the 1870s, they were the largest manufacturer of wheeled vehicles in the world. Their first automobile was 1899, 1900, was an electric designed by Thomas Edison. But they continued producing horse-drawn vehicles until almost 1930. But they were producing mostly automobiles by that time. But just look at how we had flipped this. We talk today, especially all of us that are above 50, we have trouble dealing with the speed with which the world's changing, technologies are changing. And look at these people. In 1929, we only had 4,000 horse-drawn vehicles and 4.75 million automobiles produced. But now think about that, the infrastructure that went with that. Carriage makers, wheelwrights, blacksmith shops, multi-generational businesses gone. Transition. First traffic light. And this is interesting. Americans always had their priorities, and you were talking about car people. This is for you. 3 out of 5 families have an automobile, but only 2 in 5 have indoor plumbing. So we've got to do something with this. This is out of hand. There's just, anybody who wants to build a bridge, a road, you name it. And the military got involved with this and pushing the federal government to build roads. There was a project in 1919, and there's a great book on this called The American Road. And it was a military convoy from Washington, D.C. to California, San Francisco. And it was to promote the need, push the need for a federal highway system as a matter of national defense. And it was also to test the viability of different vehicles. They had motorcycles, they had a full machine shop, 10-ton trucks, cars, you name it. One of the fellows involved with this was a fellow named Dwight David Eisenhower in 1919. So we started pushing, and the momentum was building for a federal highway system. But as all things with politics, it's wherever you go, politics is kind of like cleaning stables. It comes in different colors, but anyway. And there's always things happening with politics. So it took a few years. We started pushing for this highway system in 1830. Another thing we don't do in America is rush things. But by 1925, we'd pretty much hammered out a system that would work, and we were taking a lot of the old roads. In the Southwest, the National Old Trails Road would be suitable for a road that the U.S. Highway 66 Association began marketing as the Main Street of America. But there's a bit of plagiarism in that. Cyrus Avery had been involved with a lot of projects. He'd been involved with the Albert Pike Highway, the Ozark Trails Highway. He instituted the first gasoline tax so he could fund one of the first highway departments, start developing roads in Oklahoma. And I'm sure there's nothing political involved, but when Route 66 went through Tulsa, it makes this weird 6-block dogleg right past his gas station. And I mentioned the compromise. And this is, here we go, November 11th, 1926. We've reached a compromise. We'll give up US 60 and we'll do US 66. It's truly the dawn of a new era, but in name only. As you can see, Route 66 wasn't much different than the National Old Trails Road. That bottom picture, that horseshoe bend there, for anybody that's gone up through Oatman, anybody familiar with Oatman, Arizona, Route 66? That road was used by Route 66 until 1952. And that road was put in 1921 as an improvement for the original National Old Trails Road, because the road that went through that canyon was 26 and 28% grades. But you can see this took a while. Even though now we've got a federal name on this, it would be 1938 before US Highway 66 was fully paved. Anybody want to guess when the last US highway was paved? 1952. US 6, the forgotten cousin of Route 66. It's at the Utah-Nevada border. There was about a 50-mile stretch that wasn't paved until 1952. But it was definitely changing times. We were coming up with improved road equipment, improved road systems. We started coming up with standards for bridges. We started standardized signage, standardized road width. And it's really fascinating when you start looking at Route 66, the evolution of the highways. And some things you can't get an answer for. There's no one has been able to explain why they did it this way, because nobody wants to take credit maybe. But for example, there's an endangered section of Route 66 near Commerce, Oklahoma and Afton, Oklahoma. They call it the Sidewalk Highway. The highway is literally 7 feet wide with concrete edging and wide dirt shoulders. That was Route 66 until almost 1940. But we had other things happening, like motels, lodging was changing. We were moving from cabins, cabin camps, to motels, auto courts, trailer courts. One of the things that Emily Post encountered, and speaking of motels, another reason they wanted to reroute this along the railroad, the National Old Trails Road, you'll find this kind of funny. The reason we started evolving these motels is lodging was very sporadic and spotty. And it was like buying food in a restaurant. It might be a Tomaine Palace or it might be gourmet meals. Emily Post had an encounter in Kansas on her 1915 trip. She stopped at a hotel and they got in the habit, they had learned to check the rooms before checking in. And they were so bothered by the room, they decided to sleep in their car. And the hotel owner was incensed. He explained to them that he ran a first-class establishment and the sheets were changed every single month. But Route 66 was and is the main street of America. That's what it was promoted at. They borrowed that from the National Trails Road Association. Judge Lowe was the president in 1913. He started a marketing campaign pushing the National Trails Road. But it fit Route 66, so Cyrus Avery and the U.S. Highway 66 Association grabbed that. And Route 66 was opportunity made manifest. This is another reason Route 66 is truly an American story. Almost anybody with an idea, especially during the Depression, you could support your family on this road. You could come up with something. One of my favorites is Ed's Camp in the top left corner. That's on the road coming down from Oatman through the Black Mountains. It's in ruins now. I knew Ed Edgerton. My first paying job was working for Ed. More years ago than I care to count. But Ed came out after World War I in 1919. He'd been in Arizona in 1910, but he came out after World War I, his military stint. In this place, Ed's Camp is on old maps, it's called Little Meadows. There's an artesian well and a spring there. It was on a Native American trade route that connected Zuni and Hopi villages all the way to the coast of California, part of which became the Mojave Road through the Mojave Desert, and some of that trail became the railroad, the Beale Wagon Road, the first federally funded road in the Southwest. So this spring was very important. Father Garces chronicled a Spanish expedition in 1776. They camped at this springs. Edsel Ford stopped, filled his car with water there. Well, Ed was camping there, and a light bulb went off. All these cars, all these people camping here, there's opportunity. So just like the old days when you go and get a prospector would get grub staked by a business owner, he went to Kingman and got the Gates family at Central Commercial to front him some money to buy 50-gallon drums of gasoline. And he set them up on a A-frame kind of deal with a garden hose, basically, and started selling gasoline. And it became, in just a few years, just a lucrative business. He had a small cafe. He was selling water as well as gasoline. He had cabins to rent. It became a Pickwick bus stop. Business was booming. About 8 to 10 years into this, Ed got nervous. He decided, maybe I should buy this property instead of just squat on it and pretend I own it. It's all profit if you don't own it. But it was an opportunity made manifest. You had people with snake farms and hokey tourist camps. You had people building motels, and some beautiful resorts were built along the road. And that continues today. That's another part of the Route 66 story, the magic of this road. A fellow named Louis Keene in Missouri bought a truck stop and a topless bar in a little place called Uranus, Missouri. And he started the Uranus Fudge Company and capitalizes on juvenile humor like you wouldn't believe. But this man is brilliant at marketing. He's put together the world's largest circus sideshow museum. He's put all these things together, reminiscent of this era on Route 66. The greatest thing he did for promotion, I gotta share this. He bought the county newspaper and moved it out there to Uranus, and he renamed it the Uranus Examiner. He got the BBC to come talk to him on that one. You know, every chapter in the American story, this is another thing that makes Route 66 special. Today, when you drive this road, it's evident. But this is another part of the story that makes this so fascinating. Every single chapter of the American story, our prehistory, even our future, is tied into this road. World War II was transformative for the country. Now, I'm just sharing one example, but all up and down Route 66, we had the road changed. In Missouri, there was a section, beautiful section of Route 66 that went down through what they call the Devil's Elbow. Just a beautiful area across the Big Piney River on a steel truss bridge, which is still there, drivable. But it was a bottleneck. It was like Oatman Road, but with trees. And so for national defense, when they started building Fort Leonard Wood, they created Hooker's Cut as a war expedited effort. And it was the deepest highway cut in America at the time, and it was also the first 4-lane alignment of Route 66 in Missouri. And they started bypassing communities instead of running the road through it for military reasons. And then you had communities like Kingman, Arizona that were transformed with the establishment of the Kingman Army Airfield. This changed Kingman in so many ways. Kingman was just a western frontier ranching town, and we had one of the largest flexible gunnery schools in the United States come to town. And the other part of this, and this is not comfortable, but this isn't a political statement by any chance, it's our history. Kingman was a sundown town, that if you were black, there were certain regulations, and when this came to town, they wanted to put a colored USO club downtown. That created some legal implications that had far-reaching effects, transformative, part of the American story. Another thing unique about Route 66 that has the international connection, Fort Reno in Oklahoma is one of our old military forts dating back to the 1870s. And in the cemetery, you have Buffalo Soldiers, you have pioneers. They trained mules there, even up to 1948 for the military. During World War II, it was a POW camp. It's the only place I'm aware of in the United States there is an official German and Italian military cemetery. And they celebrate every year, and families from Europe come over, drive Route 66 out to Fort Reno. You had POW camps, you had internment camps of all kinds, up and down the road, ammunition factories, airfields. But Route 66 quickly became a victim of its own success. The road was never able to evolve fast enough to meet the crush of traffic. In 1939, the first time the Arizona Highway Department clocked 1 million vehicles entering the state of Arizona on Route 66. They estimated that 40% of the automobile traffic in the state of Arizona in 1946 was on Route 66. It was a deadly highway. Something had to be done. And that something was the Federal Aid Highway Act. That should have been the beginning of the end for Route 66. And a lot of the 2-lane highways. This is what killed them off. But it had to. It was a necessary evil. The first section of, one of the first sections of the interstate highway was actually to bypass Route 66 near Lebanon, Missouri. It was the second contract, I believe, that was put out. But even today, you can see the blending all along Route 66. You can find the blending of the past and the present. I'll get to why it's also part of the future. But here's an example. This is out in Truxton, Arizona. Truxton is I don't know what you'd say. It's kind of like Amboy after a fire, tornado, earthquake, and nobody bothered to rebuild. But you have the Beale Wagon Road, the Will Rogers Highway, the National Old Trails Road, Route 66, Native American Trade Route. And this is something else that makes Route 66 truly unique. I don't know of another highway anywhere in the world that has an international fan club. And I do mean an international fan club. There are Route 66 associations that are active and organize events in Japan, Germany, the Czech Republic, Netherlands, Canada. I work with tour companies in Australia, New Zealand, Germany that specialize in Route 66 tours. As crazy as that sounds. The middle picture on the left, the top picture is the first European Route 66 festival in Ofterdingen, Germany. And the middle picture, I was privileged to speak at, yes, I'm the short fellow there in the middle, at the 2018 European Route 66 Festival in Zlin, Czechia. And there's a reason they don't give Zlin away on game shows. You can't get there from here. But somehow, over 20,000 people from 10 countries showed up to celebrate Route 66, American cars and music. And it was very surreal. But you have guidebooks written in different languages. One of the most popular apps that has transformed Route 66 travel. Some of us were talking earlier that Route 66, when you try to follow it, it's broken. It's different alignments. There's a navigation app that's just brilliantly designed, Route 66 navigation. I've been very privileged to work with the developer of this. It's a fellow named Marian Pavel who's passionate about Route 66. He has a media and technology company in Bratislava, Slovakia. This is something I just derived a great deal of satisfaction from. Doga. I'll let you listen to this yourself. I can't do that. This is heavy, hard rock, head-banging metal music and from Czechoslovakia. Well, last year I was approached by their agent. They were going to do free concerts at historic roadhouses on Route 66 as part of a documentary. And I set them up in Kingman at the 1906 Sportsman's Saloon downtown in Kingman, Route 66. It turned out funnier than I had hoped because the manager knew about it, but she had an emergency and she left, and she had just told, the owner had left, but told the manager that we've got a band booked, but she didn't give him any details. So all the regulars show up, and we've got these guys from Czechoslovakia. That was an entertaining evening. But Route 66 truly is an amazing adventure today, my friends. That picture is from the National Route 66 Museum in Elk City, Oklahoma. It's also the National Ranching Museum and Rodeo Museum there too. You've got scenic wonders. The same thing that was drawing Edsel Ford and Emily Post, it's still there. That's in the Black Mountains on the pre-52 alignment of Route 66. I mention that road a lot because I'm partial to it. I won't go too deep because this isn't a therapy session, but it explains a lot of why I'm like this. I learned to drive on that road and learned to ride a bicycle on that road. And it's the road of dreams. When I mentioned Edsel Ford's trip, this is something I got into. The Historic Vehicle Association, back in 2015, they decided to recreate Edsel Ford's trip in a 1915 Ford. And they decided to follow as much of the original alignment as they could, including out here in the Mojave Desert, through Danby and not through Amboy, but south in the desert. And I got to tell you, I have to do some serious drinking to take my Jeep where they took that Ford. It's quite astounding. But it really is the American story made manifest, and it's the quintessential American road trip. I mentioned the international interest in this, and you had mentioned the popularity of the song. One of the most amazing things that I got out of going to Zlin, Czechia, I had a gentleman, his English was better than my Czechoslovakian, but we managed to figure this out. But he talked about growing up behind the Iron Curtain and listening to Radio Free America, listening to that song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66, and watching bootleg copies of Easy Rider. And he said for his generation, Route 66 came to symbolize freedom like a previous generation saw in the Statue of Liberty. So it's a pretty amazing highway. And I mentioned time capsules. This is the general store in Daggett, California. That opened in 1909 and it's still going. This is Cool Springs in the Black Mountains, Lopeman, going up to through western Arizona. One of my favorite places here, the Wagon Wheel Motel. They've been 90 years. The oldest continuously operated motel on Route 66. The magic of Route 66, what makes this road truly magical, it's got an infectious magic, it's the people. It's the people you meet, like that fellow in Czechoslovakia. It's people like Connie Eccles that has the Wagon Wheel Motel. She retired, this was going to be condemned, it was a crack house. And when she retired, her and her sister decided we need a project. They started sanding floors, they started repairing casements, and they turned this back into a real treasure. This is a great story here. This is Earl's Motor Corp in Winslow, Arizona. And the story is really fabulous. This is a 1953 motel that opened as the Marble Motel. And like a lot of the motels from that era, as the chain motels started coming in, these mom and pops couldn't compete. And even by the mid-60s, they were dying off. The World Monuments Fund a couple of years ago listed the commercial properties, specifically motels, on Route 66 as the most endangered commercial properties we have in America. They became flop houses, weekly rentals, they became eyesores, and the property became too valuable to have something like that. They started to vanish. The rarest of these motels are the auto courts, the pre-war motels that have the garages with the rooms. Those are very rare. And then the rarest of all are the motels listed in the Green Book for the Negro motorist. Less than 1% of those survive. Earl's Motor Court, though, is really interesting. Angela and Bloss, multi-generation Winslow people. They grew up poor working people. Her mother was a waitress, her dad was a mechanic. You know, they were just simple people. They got a settlement. He got hurt real bad, and they got a settlement. They decided to do something. They wanted to be part of the Route 66 community. They bought the old motel and fixed it up, and it's a beautiful time capsule. Seligman, Arizona. This is one of my favorites, too. As you can tell, I like food, especially good pie. This is Angela's Cafe in the old train depot in Gallup, New Mexico. And not much has changed in the last 90 years there at Angela's. Gallup is, you see, this is another example. When you travel this road, you take the time, you talk to the people, you meet the people. Angela, 4 generations in Gallup doing business. You'll find things on Route 66. Another thing that's fascinating with this road, you'll find new businesses that mimic the old, like I mentioned Louis Keene's Uranus Fledge Company. But you'll find things like Clanton's Cafe in Veneta, Oklahoma, that one family owned. They've been open there since 1927. You have one up here in San Bernardino, Mieta Cafe, that's been there since, 34, I think, one family owned. Then you add that international mix, and it becomes so fascinating. You're sitting in Clanton's Cafe having chicken fried steak and a cobbler, and here's farmers showing up parking their John Deeres out front, coming in with their bib overalls, and then here's a German motorcycle club. And it's just an entertaining mix. But when you talk to these people, they all have one thing in common, an infectious magic. Route 66 was marketed since 1927 as the road of dreams. People chasing dreams. After the war, moving to California. The Great Depression, hoping for a better life. It's always been the road of dreams. We saw it in the TV show. Even though only, I think, 6 episodes were actually filmed on Route 66. It was marketed as the road of dreams. And it's no different today. But sometimes the dreams are a little, well, get a little eccentric sometimes. I shared this upstairs, but I can't answer everybody who asks me for information, but I try to help as many people as I can plan a trip on any road trip, but specifically Route 66. And I had a Frenchman contact me for quite a few months asking for information, different things. What he didn't tell me was that he was a French mime, or that he was going to attempt a 6-foot stilt walking record from Navy Pier in Chicago to Santa Monica Pier in California. I confess, I have a very dark sense of humor, and when I heard that he had a heat stroke in Oklahoma, the first thing that came to mind was, how does a French mime call for help in Oklahoma? But you know the most amazing thing about this road today? It doesn't exist. It disappeared as a U.S. highway. It has not officially existed since 1985. And yet this thing is the most popular highway in the world. World Monuments Fund, a couple of years back, I attended a conference in Anaheim, and they were talking about that in the world, they claimed that the Route 66 shield is more recognized than Coca-Cola symbol. And you'll find it in places that make no sense at all. In Worms, Germany, I saw a mural in a mall. It had a whole Route 66. There was Amboy's sign, all these things in there. I was in Poland, And a Polish farmer had all the 8 Route 66 shields around his shed. It's just the strangest thing you've ever seen in your life. And you could be in Belgium having a beer, and somebody will come up and talk to you, and they'll start talking about Route 66, and they'll ask, does Angel still cut hair in Seligman? It's a really surreal thing, and it's just something you've got to experience. It truly is an amazing road trip, whether you do all or part of it. There's nothing like it. The world's largest Czechoslovakian Culture Festival, been going on for 50 plus years, takes place in Yukon, Oklahoma, along Garth Brooks Boulevard, which is Route 66. You can't get much more American than that. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If I don't know the answer, I bet I can make something up.
Thank you. A couple of things before we get to the questions. I missed someone. I don't want to forget her. Malia Williamson, if you would stand. She's a candidate for Riverside County Office of Education. Also, I want to say thank you very much to our sponsors. We got 10 sponsors this year, and I want to recognize the sponsors. Some of them are here tonight. We'll start with the Lake Elsinore Valley Chamber of Commerce as a sponsor, so thank you, Kimberly. Also, a sponsor is Elsinore Barber and Beauty. Tina Breeze is here. Tina, if you would wave. Nicole Daly is here, and she owns Daily Strategies, so thank you, Nicole. We appreciate your support. Also, I want to say thank you to Happy Bubbles, which is a new car wash, which is going to come to Lake Elsinore soon. Also to A1 Executive Rides, they were a sponsor. The Farmers Insurance Company, Michelle Munoz, a lot of you know Michelle, her organization sponsored this, so thank you, Michelle. TLC Group Services also sponsored, so thank you. We have another person here tonight, Helen Jong. Helen is here, and she has KW, the Lakes Real Estate. So Helen, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. Drew's Party Rentals as well. Jamie from Canyon Hills was a sponsor, and I think that was all 10. No, there was one more. The Downtown Merchants Association also sponsored. So thank you to DMA. I really, truly appreciate everybody who sponsored. All right, the way we're going to do the questions is a little bit different because I only have one mic. So what I'm going to do, and John Hess, who is doing our recording, and his partner Joseph is here. What we're going to do is I'm going to hand you the mic. You ask your question. I'm going to take the mic back and then give it to you, sir. Okay? Next year, I promise we'll have 2 mics. Does anybody have any questions? We'll start here with Kim McElroy.
It's actually not a question. It's a big thank you to Tim.
Oh.
This
No.
wouldn't be what it is if he weren't such a proponent of this whole fair. Thank you.
All right, let me go over to Nancy.
I don't think I need a mic. Okay.
Well, for the recording.
How many miles is it from point A to point B for the entire road, in case Jeopardy calls?
It really depends on which alignment you follow. It's like, as just an example, in western Arizona, from just outside of Ash Fork to the Colorado River, depending on which alignment you follow, it's either 148 or 156 miles. We just round it off and call it 160 miles of smiles because that's better for marketing and advertising. But it's about 2,400 miles. It depends on which
Let me
alignment.
go
If
to
you go
Terry,
through
then we'll
Santa
come back
Fe,
here. Sir?
Where is the largest drivable segment of Route 66?
in your backyard. Gotta come see me. Western Arizona, from Crookton Road, just east of Seligman, you can drive almost 160 miles to the Colorado River on Route 66 uninterrupted. Oklahoma has more miles of Route 66, but it's broken up pretty much.
Go over here.
11 years ago, I drove Route 66 on my 66th birthday. From Kingman far as I could go west. And then I would have to detour and find little pieces here and there. In some places it looked like it was under construction. Has it ever reopened anywhere? Also, they had vermicelli signs along the.
The road's always evolving and changing. You know, the stretch through the Mojave Desert now, they're replacing a lot of the old bridges out by Amboy. I don't know if they'll ever reopen the section from Amboy up through Cadiz and up to Essex. But the road's always changing and evolving. And like New Mexico, when you were asking about how long it is, and I mentioned alignments, a great example is like in New Mexico, Route 66 is pretty much gone because it's been buried by I-40 from Santa Rosa to Moriarty. But the original alignment of Route 66 made a huge loop, several hundred miles more, up through Santa Fe and down. So it's constantly changing.
Any other questions? All right, this one, and if there's one more, we'll take that. And then I have a very special presentation. Hand that back, please.
Thank you. You mentioned bicycle clubs, but also there were motorcycle clubs back in the day. How did they influence Route 66?
I got a great story for that. Motorcycles were a big part of this early. The same with bicycles, people traveling this. And this will be real brief, but Effie Hotchkiss, for your homework assignment. You want to read about an amazing woman. 1915, she was obsessed with speed and motorcycles. She beat up on Harley Davidson until they gave her a motorcycle and trained her as a mechanic. And she would get in trouble for riding at 70 miles an hour on Broadway in New York, 1912, 13. And this is not me, this is from the newspaper. She decided to go to the Panama Pacific Exposition from New York and California, 1915. And she had a custom-made sidecar for her, quote, rotund mother to accompany me.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. Before we let you go, if my friend Matthew Dobler would come up. As you know, we have a former Lake Elsinore City Council person who is now a state assembly woman, and that is Natasha Johnson. And Mr. Dobler, in addition to the fact that he is a director with EVMWD, also works for Assemblywoman Johnson, and he has a presentation to give to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Thank you, Mr. Hinckley. On behalf of the California Legislature and Assemblywoman Natasha Johnson, we would like to present you with this certificate of recognition in honor of your dedication to the preservation of American history, and recognition of your dedication to the preservation of not only American history, but Route 66 and its history. So thank you very much.
Sir, thank you. I'm going to need a bigger hat. Thank you. That is really cool. Sir, thank you.
And thank you to Assemblywoman Johnson. We truly appreciate your thoughtfulness here, and thank you to Matthew Dobler as well. I'll finally call up Kim McElroy for a final word.
Just tripping all over myself here. Final word is thank you all so much, and thank Tim especially for all his good promotion. Isn't he a great promoter? I know, I'm keeping him. He can stay. No, but just thank you, and I hope you enjoyed tonight.
And thank you again, Mr. Hinckley. We appreciate your talk. Thank you very much. We'll be back next year with another Atkins Speaker Series event. We'll see you then. Thank you all.
Yes.